guests, I'll promise to make my question as short as possible so that we'll have time for your questions. So, you worked with companies from all over the world, many from Forbes 500, and you mentioned in your lecture a lot about recent paradigm shift. But what can you say is happening at the moment in a sense of geographically? Where are the paradigm shifts happening at the moment, and in which areas the fastest?
That's an interesting question because I don't see them geographically. I read 45 publications a month and then look at a whole bunch of stuff on the internet to see what's going on. And the scatter is quite impressive. Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, India, Tata is doing some amazing things, paradigm shifting stuff in cars. Europe still is a rich bed of these. In fact, some of the examples I do actually tried to take them from different points in the world. The USA has still got a very good skill at doing this because our education and entrepreneur system is actually set up for this. If you were going to try and design a system to stimulate paradigm shift kind of thinking, what we have in the US, accidentally by the way, that was not, we didn't figure that out, it just happened out the way, is that we have more ways to stimulate the paradigm shift idea than most other organizations have. But Canada's done some great work. So it's not a geographic thing, it's more a where you have openness to new ideas so people can get past that. In fact, quick story, there's a Japanese Nobel Prize winner, won it relatively young, I can't remember his name right now, but Wall Street Journal interviewed him. And they said, so why are you at MIT doing your research? And he said, oh, you don't understand, if I had been in Japan, I would have been an assistant to a senior researcher. And I would have had to work my way up so that when I was 50, I might be able to do the research I'm doing right now at 30. So that's what, if you're looking at anything, is what are the inhibitors in the various cultures that say, especially young people, you got to get in line and work through it. The U.S. doesn't do that, and that's one of our great strengths. And I would recommend it strongly here in Slovenia too, to make sure that your young people have high access to trying out radical and developing radical new ideas.
And vision without action is a dream. This is what you said in the late 90s and 80s when you introduced the corporate world to the paradigm shift. And one is working with companies. And is it different with countries? And speaking in a sense of power or vision, how do you see Slovenia and what are next steps for Slovenia?
Okay. We got two things here. The quote is, vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision just passes the time. Action with vision can change the world. The microloan example is an example of one person changing the world. So when people say, oh, no, it doesn't happen. Yeah, it does. It happens on a regular basis. Here's why I so enjoy coming here, is because, and Challenge Future is a really good example of this. You're just a little country. What are you doing this for, right? Because you want to affect the world. And that's the first step. If in fact, quick story, there are no stories that are quick on there. But this is an important one. I got to study with the Women's to Growth team back in the 70s. We studied in Denmark, went to a place called Kola in Copenhagen, and I spent a month learning the systems dynamic stuff. Anyway, people from all over the world, including the Dutch and the Danes. Dutch and the Danes, and about the same size population. So at the end of the 30 days, Dennis Meadows got up and said, okay, so what are you going to do with this information? And the Dane raised his hand and said, well, we're pretty small, and we'll try and apply some of the ideas here, but that's about the best we can do. The Dutchman raised his hand and said, we're going to change the world. We're going to take this everywhere. And I thought, what a difference. Here the Danes say, well, we're not big enough. Here the Dutch, that was irrelevant. You guys are much more like the Dutch.
Once you said, and today also you mentioned that the first attribute of a leader is ability to get your team to a place that they would not go by themselves.
Right.
Where is that place? And what are the skills of a leader in
In the context of my work, you are always leading to the future. That's why I had that chart about present and future. In crisis, we're here in the present tense. And I was talking about, what brings the leader back from really spending a lot of time in the future? Number one, crisis. Number two, recognition. Coming back to recognize people doing great work in the present. But if you're in the present a lot as a leader, then you don't have the time to do the work out here. I worked with a company in Erie. It was a glue company. And the Lord Corporation was the name. Man, it just came now. It's amazing memory. I haven't thought about that in 20 years. Sorry. Lord Corporation in Erie, the CEO every summer would call up about 10 universities from around the United States, send them each a little gift of $10,000, and say, if you wouldn't mind, I'll be stopping by your city. Would you mind if I met with some of your chemistry professors? Then, by the way, he carried with him the unsolved problems that they have identified. And then while they were having lunch, he would say, now, we've been working on this problem. How would you go about this? Okay, that's a leader. See, he was out finding the future and then bringing that information back and connecting it and making it useful for Lord Corporation. Some of that information took 5 years to get into production. He understood his role, which was, my job is to go out there, find the future, lead my company to it.
And now, dear guests, I invite you for your questions. There is a microphone in the audience. There are two hands.
Good evening, Mr. Barker. It was very nice to speak with you yesterday. My question is that we can all agree that there needs to be a paradigm shift in the banking industry. So do you think that we can expect a change of that sort to come soon so that we don't have to see history repeating?
I missed the very first part. Which industry?
Banking industry.
The banking industry. Well, I say that I had the good fortune to work with 3 big banks simultaneously, and they all had 3 different strategies for their future, and they all succeeded. So in one sense, I have a really good feeling about working with banks, but they were also, U.S. Bank was one of them who never got into derivatives, so they were also making really good judgments about what to do and what not to do. I think probably if I were going to look for any change, and a change that we need is we really have to disconnect the banks again from the stock market. That taking down that wall between the banks and the stock market was destroyed a pretty successful paradigm and did not replace it with a better one. See, all new paradigms are not necessarily better. Derivatives was a paradigm. I don't think we will want to do that way again. The rules they deployed for that were unsuccessful. They did not solve problems. They created problems. So I think the financial industry is, in fact, in a very interesting place right now because they're going to have to figure out, no, they don't have to, but we would like them to figure out a better, more thoughtful way of dealing with our money. So I wish I could give you a hard statement, but what we can do is we can hope for the best on our banks. Sorry, that's the best I can do.
Fifth row.
Myself, Jatin Kataria, I'm from India. I have 2 questions. One is, don't you think we need a paradigm shift with 2 words, which is students and new professionals, like the people who join companies?
Now, could you talk a little slower, please?
Okay.
Because I'm getting rebound off the roof. I'm not getting your words clear.
Yeah. I have 2 questions basically. One is, don't you think that we need a paradigm? Okay, don't you think?
Don't I think?
We need paradigm shift in 2 particular, paradigm shift in with 2 words, which is student and a new professionals. Like treat students as professionals and don't treat new professionals as students. And another question is, what do you think when insider of the company, like insiders, suggest new paradigm shift to management and they refuse this kind of paradigm shift, then what that insider should do?
I can answer the second one, I think. one of the reasons that the paradigm discussion has had such a long life, you know, we talk about long tails. I gave the first speech on paradigms in 1974, and here I am giving it in 2012. And the reason for that is because it helps explain why I am resistant to ideas I shouldn't be. And I state that as the way I want the insider to respond to it, okay? So the reason I did all those talks and the reason the films got translated into 20 languages and literally, our calculation, more than 100 million people have seen that film, is because it gives people an understanding of a behavior that they really shouldn't have. Which is, if this changes the rules at all or breaks the rule at all, I am adamantly opposed to it. What we've tried to get people to do is say, at least take the time to listen. And so my experience has been that there are still many companies, by the way, that require people to see that video. It's the first thing they do with their new hires, is they show them the paradigm video to say, you have to be flexible as we change things around here. So I think we're actually, there's a corporate, at least with my clients, a long-term corporate movement to make sure that people do not get into that frozen, paradigm-paralyzed state that insiders get to. Sorry for, again, taking so long, but that's the best I can do.
Thank you, Joel, for the presentation. I have one question. It's about your paradigm curve, the problem-solved one. I believe you've heard about crossing the chasm. Is there a reason why it's not accounted within your curve? Because like for mobile payments, it went up maybe in 2000, and then it delayed like on straight line, and then around 2008, when social networks started to come, then mobile payments went up again. Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah. Afterwards, we'll sit down and draw what you said, because I'd like to picture better what you're saying. But the reason I draw that curve that way is because it's like 95% of the paradigms I've studied, the old paradigm uncovered the problems that triggered the new paradigm. And so there is, I always see this connection, intellectual connection from I'm practicing the old paradigm, I'm trying to solve these problems with the old rules, they don't work, therefore now I need to start looking for new rules. But it's connected, they're one catalyzes the other. So that's why I draw it that way. But there may be other ways to illustrate that would say something about the intellectual gap between the old and the new. So let's, we'll meet at the reception and let's draw that.
Okay, there was one more in the second row.
Thank you, Violeta Bulc from Slovenia. I just wanted to ask you, is there a particular reason why in all your examples of the paradigm shift, you showed only technological shifts? What do you see a value of a social paradigms, and do you see that maybe a social paradigms are those that we really need today? Thank you.
Actually, I think I showed 3 non-technology solutions. I showed frequent flyers, I showed microloans, I showed Facebook.
Okay, those are services, but what about real social paradigms that were happening in the past? Change of slavery, the introduction of, for example, of a pension funds and things like that.
I think historically, you can apply this discussion way back because it's human condition. Figure out how to solve problems because I want to have an efficient way to do it. Solve a bunch of problems to the point where I literally start uncovering accidentally problems that I can't solve with that, triggering the search for solving those problems, and it's taking off again. So as a concept, I think you can go back and look at these things. The advent of democracy was a paradigm shift. The destruction of slavery was a paradigm shift for the American South. I'm thinking nationally and personally and in terms of my own historical background. So I think the idea is, at least I have not found a place, if you've got a paradigm, usually the concepts work. It's an outsider. In the U.S., Harriet Beecher Stowe, a little old lady, had a huge impact on the elimination of slavery in the United States. You wouldn't have picked her. She was clearly outside the boundaries in one sense, but she wasn't. So again, I would invite you to take a look at the things that you think are paradigm shifts and just try and apply the model that I've offered you and see if it works. And if it doesn't, then that would be an example where my model would not work. That's right, isn't it? That's correct.
Since we are running out of time, I wanted to conclude our discussion with one of your most famous quotes, but you've used it in your presentation, so I have a backup. And I would like to conclude with also one of your famous quote, which was intended for leaders, I read. So, no one will thank you for taking care of the present if you have neglected the future.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So,
great.
the